aggressive form of brain cancer?
Well, it's obviously it's tough news. You know, we know that he has been dealing with this since last summer, since July of last year. He had an operation at that time, and he's been undergoing therapy. Typically that's chemotherapy and radiation. It can be tough. It can be very hard to go through this therapy. The goal, obviously, is to try and combat the cancer cells in the brain. But you know, what it sounds like, Ryan, has happened is that at some point, always you're making sort of a risk-benefit analysis, like how much benefit am I getting for this, given the toll that this therapy has taken on my body. And it sounds like now the inflection point is coming where he says the risks no longer outweigh the benefits. It's tough, Ryan. No matter how you look at it, it's a tough thing. This type of tumor, as you know, as I think a lot of people who've been following Senator McCain's story know,
Back the House in the fall, in order for the president to be removed from office, even if he is impeached, would require conviction in the Senate. The map does not look as favorable for Democrats on that side. It's going to take Republicans standing up with a voice similar to yours if this is even possible. And frankly, sir, there just aren't a lot of Republicans who are saying the same things that you are, even if privately they may have concerns about President Trump.
Yeah, I was on Capitol Hill during the Bill Clinton impeachment, and there are a lot of parallels here. Should Democrats take the House, I believe they will open an inquiry pretty much immediately in January or February. Ultimately, they might actually vote to impeach. It would move to the Senate. To your point, I don't believe the votes are there in the Senate, but we're also talking about 6 months from now. And the reality is Michael Flynn's sentencing has just been delayed because he is continuing to cooperate. Trump's CFO is now cooperating. Michael Cohen, his loyalists are beginning to turn on him. And I do believe at some point Trump's going to fire Jeff Sessions. So the walls will begin to crack within the Republican caucus in the Senate. We will see how this plays out. But the first step in this, I do believe Congress, Republicans won't do it, but Democrats should be honest about it and say it is time to open an impeachment inquiry in the House of Representatives into what is admitted criminal behavior by the President of the United States of America.
I mean, you mentioned poll numbers, and one of the reasons that Democrats seem reluctant to do this. That is, to a certain extent, important for lawmakers, though, right, to listen to the voice of their constituents. I know that I was in Ohio a couple of weeks ago for the special election there, and I talked to a lot of voters, and they did not seem all that focused on the Russia investigation. I mean, where's the balance here? The voters should have a say in this, right?
Oh, I love that question, and here's why. You're right. The Russia investigation is probably not going to be mentioned in this race, but the Cohen matter is very different. This is a president who's lied and been implicated in a crime. But to your point, you know, one of my colleagues in Congress, Mark Sanford, a very good friend, once taught me that in politics, you're either a leading indicator or a lagging indicator. And too often, the majority of politicians simply follow the polls because, to your point, there is merit in following where the voters currently are. But there are few people, and frankly, on a day where we're talking about John McCain, he's one of them, who are willing to stand up and be a leading indicator and say to voters, I believe this is where we need to go, and I'm asking you to follow me. I want to see voices begin to say, it's time we talk about impeachment, and I'm asking you to come with me, because I think there are enough American people that even in November would say, I'm with you on that.
All right, let me ask you about Senator McCain. Back in May, you called him a remarkable American hero, a man who your party should emulate. What are your thoughts about him right now? This is someone you obviously served with in Congress. You must have a heavy heart right now.
I do. Look, in a town too often filled with cowardice, this was a man of courage. And in a town defined by frauds, he was the real deal. And it is important that we recognize his leadership, whether you agreed with him or not. This is someone who spoke to his own convictions, not to the politics of convenience. He will likely forever be remembered for that visual of the thumbs down on the Obamacare repeal, having been the former nominee of the Republican Party. I also think in the long lens of history, and not to take anything away from John McCain on this day, but we have to recognize that his candidacy was a departure point for the Republican Party, where they chose to go a different way. And they chose to double down on a hardline Sarah Palin-type conservatism that later embraced Donald Trump. And John McCain stood on principle the entire time and tried to fight within his own party for what he believed in. The party's gone a different direction, and it's a sad decision the party made. It's a sad day for the country, certainly a sorrowful day for the McCain family.
First, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization was just granted immunity by the U.S. Attorney's Office involved in the Michael Cohen case, what it means for the investigation and for President Trump coming up. Plus, sad news this hour as we learn that Senator John McCain, battling brain cancer, has decided to forego all future treatment. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeting, quote, "My thoughts and prayers are with Senator McCain and his family." And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell tweeting, "Very sad to hear this morning's update from the family of our dear friend Senator John McCain. We are so fortunate to call him our friend and colleague. John, Cindy, and the entire McCain family are in our prayers at this incredibly difficult hour." Let's bring in CNN's Barbara Starr from the Pentagon. Obviously, you've covered Senator McCain's career very closely from your perch at the Pentagon. He's one of the leading voices when it comes to national security and defense. Barbara, just your initial thoughts about this news that Senator McCain will no longer seek treatment for his brain cancer.
Well, good morning, Ryan. What I can tell you is I've been out in the Pentagon hallways just a few steps from here talking to people, and already this morning the Pentagon, the U.S. military really has tears in its eyes. You cannot talk to anybody here about Senator McCain this morning without their voice catching, without them sort of looking down, not wanting to show, but also wanting to show that the emotion they feel about this man. For the U.S. military, this is not about politics. No one here is going to talk about politics and John McCain. They are going to talk about what they consider this is military family business this morning on this journey with this very honors will be rendered to Senator McCain at every step on this journey. One military officer telling me this is a huge loss for the U.S. Navy and for the U.S. military. Senator McCain, no stronger advocate over the decades for the trooper in the field. But it is his service in Vietnam that everybody remembers. You know, shot down October 26, 1967, serving more than 5 years in a North Vietnamese POW camp, tortured and in pain. And you know, the U.S. military doesn't like to talk about pain of the wounded, pain of dying on the battlefield, pain of being a POW under torture. It makes everybody uncomfortable. But Senator McCain was one of those men who served in that very dark place so many years ago, and you cannot get around it. This is a man who survived torture, as did other POWs, and got on with his life and continued to serve his country. He stayed in touch with other POWs. These were men that grew old together, and this morning, all of them who are still with us very much, I know, wishing Senator McCain the best on this journey. The U.S. military watching all of this very closely, very sad, determined that Senator McCain will be honored by this country. Brian?
And no doubt, Barbara, even right up until the end, he's been fighting on behalf of the military. This latest defense spending bill includes an increase for members of the military, a spending or a salary increase, and of course has his name on it. Obviously, many people thinking about Senator McCain at the Pentagon. Barbara, thank you for that report. Also, the House Speaker Paul Ryan tweeting, "John McCain personifies service to our country. The whole House is keeping John and his family in our prayers during this time." Details on the breaking news that federal prosecutors have now granted immunity to Alan Weisselberg, the longtime chief financial officer for the Trump Organization and someone who's been with the company for decades. CNN's Kara Scannell, she's all over this story. She has new information. Kara, what can you tell us?
Well, Ryan, Evan Perez and I have been told by sources that Alan Weisselberg was granted immunity for his testimony by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, who is investigating Michael Cohen. Now, we understand that Weisselberg was interviewed several weeks ago, that he was questioned about the payments that were made to Michael Cohen, the Trump Organization reimbursement to Michael Cohen, who had paid Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about her alleged affair with the president, and that he has not been called back since. So the U.S. Attorney's Office has given Weisselberg immunity, and they discussed with him these payments to Michael Cohen. Ryan.
All right, Kara Scannell, thank you for that. Joining me now, CNN legal analyst, defense attorney, and former federal prosecutor Shan Wu. Shan, just quickly, it seems from what Kara's reporting that this seems to be a pretty narrow scope that Alan Weisselberg is involved in, at least at this point.
It does. There's a question, though, as to when he was granted the immunity, and we can safely assume that there's been a lot of interviewing that's already gone on. So we don't know the full scope of what he may have given already to the prosecutors. I think importantly, too, we hear so much talk about Trump's strategy being all political, geared towards public opinion and impeachment. He's got to remember that the legal strategy matters. If he ends up on trial in the Senate, it's not going to be like a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. The legal strategy, his credibility, all that's going to matter. And right now, his team is in disarray in terms of the strategy.
And does it mean that Fallon Weisselberg has already agreed to cooperate on some level? Even if he hasn't called back, that doesn't mean he couldn't be called back in the future, right?